I'm John Batchelor. My professionals, my colleague Thaddeus McCotter of WJR, John Fund of the National Review Online, David Drucker of Washington Examiner. My question begins with you, David, because you watch Congress professionally. And Congress is on vacation. They're out of town. They're on a break. Do you see the unhappiness, the turmoil in Ferguson, Missouri, as something Congress wants to get involved in, or are they pleased to step back? Are they willing, ready to step back and permit the executive to handle the upset?
I think for the most part, particularly because it's an election year, they will be content to let the executive handle this issue. I think that the most interesting thing that the president said today in relation to Ferguson was when he commented on what he described as the militarization of the police and their ability to obtain military-style equipment through grants from the federal government that have gone generally unchecked, as he described it, and he thought Congress might want to have something to say about that at some point. I don't know if that's the case, but to me, that was the most newsworthy thing to come out of his press conference today in regards to Ferguson.
Mr. Fund, you are the co-author of a new book, Obama's Enforcer, which is about Eric Holder, and his term is now 2 terms. This is his second term as Attorney General of the United States, but of course he was Deputy Attorney General under the Clinton administration as well, so he's had long experience at justice. The president's decision today was that the Attorney General will go to Ferguson, Missouri, and meet with and look upon and review the turmoil. Is Mr. Holder happy about this? Does this please him? Is this his role for the Obama administration?
Well, just remember, at the beginning of the administration, he made several verbal stumbles and was pretty much kept off of the Sunday talk shows, pretty much kept out of news conferences where lots of questions were asked. So the last few weeks, we have seen a return of Eric Holder to center stage. I don't think he's displeased. I think as he told us very recently, he is an activist attorney general. This is a great challenge for him. There may be danger here, but there's great opportunity, I'm sure, as he sees it, for great healing and great lessons to be taught.
Thaddeus?
So, Mr. Fund, you're saying he views this as a teachable moment.
Well, remember, we're cowards on race, and he isn't, and so step into the fray.
Do you see any of this really helping, let alone resonating with the American people, to have something like this, a tragic, unfortunate incident, societal unrest, actually help the American people experience and understand themselves and grasp the future in a more favorable way?
I don't have the worldview that prevails in the White House, but some people in the White House do.
David, the president emphasized, I believe this is accurate, I'm looking at a quote, I believe this is accurate, the president emphasized that the decision to call it the National Guard was Governor Nixon's and not the White House's. What does that mean? Well, how did you hear that, David?
Well, that was notable. I mean, having lived through the 92 riots in L.A., the National Guard is inevitably called up when people that want to take advantage of the incident start to engage in criminal activity purely for their own purposes, and it has nothing to do with community unrest over the shooting. And I'm not sure why the president felt the need to emphasize that, other than to make clear where the chain of command was there. I suppose there was a sensitivity possibly to the fact that in a sense he would have called in the military to deal with that, but this is something, once it reaches this level and you need a certain show of strength to suppress criminal activity that surrounds this sort of thing, it's calling it the National Guard is pretty standard.
Thaddeus, the president's remarks today about Ferguson, was he seeking to calm things down? Why did he believe it was necessary to get involved, the executive to get involved? After all, he's sending his attorney general. Isn't that enough?
Well, he's been involved, and I think the American people, in fairness to the president, expect some type of comment out of him, some type of recognition that he is aware that something important or a moment is happening here in the United States. And I think that he was right to address it. Now, what he said about it, the militarization of the police, when in fact the National Guard is coming in, the disavowal to make clear that he did not send in the National Guard, all these types of things tend to cloud and obfuscate the issue. What's really needed is a straightforward address to the American people and to the people of Ferguson. That what's going on there has to stop. It has to become peaceful. It has to become civil. I'm not saying he has to be Robert Kennedy in Indianapolis in 1968, but he has to give us some type of instruction and understanding, both for himself and for all of us, that something good can come out of this if good behavior does prevail.
Mr. Fund, what do we know about Governor Nixon? He's a Democrat. Does he belong to a particular part of the Democratic Party, though? Liz Warren, for example, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama?
No, he's the former Attorney General of the state, so he has a law enforcement background. I think he has been taken aback by much of what's happened, both by the incompetence of the local police force, which has made this much worse, and the constant second-guessing of the White House. John, the White House has ordered now a third autopsy of Mr. Brown's body, with no evidence that the original autopsy was either incompetent or corrupt. This is micromanagement at an absurd level.
David, I was a young person. I keep calling upon my youth here, but all these things did happen once upon a time in the 1960s. Thaddeus, I believe you were born right before or after the Detroit riots of 68. Is that right, Thaddeus?
Yeah, I was born in 65, August, probably during the Watts riots.
Right.
Not necessarily there.
I recall, David, that once it starts, it doesn't get better. It gets worse. Is that your sense in Washington, listening to the president today, that he's anticipating this is going to take a hard turn before it gets better?
Well, I don't know if I was able to discern any of that. I think what the president was trying to do, and I agree with Thaddeus here, is speak to an issue that I think requires his input as a national leader. And I thought he was actually trying to balance both sides of it as best he could, in terms of saying that clearly there are criminals need to be prosecuted, but that the police needs to conduct itself lawfully, and you really need to have trust in the community of law enforcement. If there's any, I think everybody is probably going to make some mistakes here. What I would say is that you're right that this stuff has a sort of ebb and flow and a cycle, and it starts small. People are upset. Other people use this as a reason to do whatever they want to do, and eventually it's suppressed and it runs its course. I don't think we've seen the last of it because of that.
David Drucker of the Washington Examiner, John Fund of the National Review Online, Thaddeus McCotter of WJR. And Thaddeus, I call upon the Detroit model just because you and I have been talking about it for years now. It's a sad direction, and I hope that I'm not seeing Ferguson follow that direction.
Well, I hope you're right, John, and I would hope that the view of Robert Kennedy again in Indianapolis in 1968 prevails.
Thaddeus McCotter, WJR. I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show.